My dad looked me in the eye and said, "Only your brother makes us proud." I just calmly replied, "He also makes you carry his mountain of debt from his failing business." Dinner went cold after that. I grew up in a two-story colonial outside Dayton, Ohio. The family photos on the staircase told you everything. Jason's senior portrait was in a gold frame. Mine was in a black plastic one from Target. Maybe nobody planned it that way, or maybe they did. I stopped trying to figure it out around age 14. Jason is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the one my parents introduced first at every cookout, church event, and school function. This is Jason. He's on the student council. Then came a pause. And this is Ryan. That was it. My dad, Michael, was a middle manager at a paper distribution company for 31 years. In his mind, Jason was going to break the cycle and do something big. My mom, Patricia, backed that belief with every spare dollar and every ounce of attention. When Jason needed a car for college, they co-signed a lease. When I needed a car for work, Dad told me to check Craigslist. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because you need to understand the math of my family. Jason was the investment. I was the emergency fund nobody planned to use. The one person who never treated me that way was Grandpa George, Dad's father, a retired plumber, 84 years old, still sharp as a box cutter. He gave me my first real set of tools when I was 12. Channel locks, a pipe wrench, and a voltage tester. He looked at me and said, "You've got hands that want to work, kid. Don't let anybody talk you out of that." I held on to those words like a life raft. I didn't go to college. Jason earned a business degree from Ohio State. I earned my EPA 68 certification through a 6-month trade program and started pulling copper lines in commercial buildings when I was 19. My parents treated it like a funeral. Mom once asked Dad, thinking I couldn't hear, "What am I supposed to tell the Hendersons their son was pre-med?" I moved out at 18, rented a room above a laundromat in Kettering, and started working for Comfort Systems. I was the youngest guy on every crew. I got the worst calls, showed up early, stayed late, kept my mouth shut, and watched everything. By 23, I had my contractor's license. By 25, I started Barrett Mechanical LLC. For the first 2 years, it was just me, a used service van, and a cheap laptop running QuickBooks. I started with residential work, then picked up small commercial jobs. I underbid everyone, delivered clean work, never missed a deadline, and eventually people started calling me instead of the other way around. While I was doing that, Jason was on his third career pivot. First came a clothing brand that never got past an Instagram page. Then crypto consulting, which mostly meant a Discord server and a ring light. Then about a year and a half ago, he decided to become a real estate mogul. To get him started, Dad co-signed a $40,000 loan for licensing fees, a website, marketing materials, professional headshot, a new wardrobe, and what Jason called operating capital. Mom mentioned it casually at Thanksgiving. "Your father's helping Jason get set up. Isn't that exciting?" I nodded and kept eating. 18 months later, Jason had closed exactly 0 deals. He had a polished website, gold foil business cards, and a $40,000 loan that was 3 months behind on payments. I knew because Dad called me 11 days before the family reunion. He almost never called. "Ryan, you got a minute?" he asked. After asking about work, the weather, and whether I was eating okay, he finally said, "Your brother's going through a rough patch. He's behind on some payments and the bank's calling. I was wondering if maybe you could help him out." "How?" I asked. "Maybe cover a couple months of payments." "He's got some deals in the pipeline." I leaned back in my chair. "Dad, I'm not covering Jason's loan payments." After a long silence, he said quietly, "Ryan, I co-signed that loan. I understand. But if Jason wants to work for me, I'll start him at $20 an hour. I need guys." The silence that followed had weight. "I'll talk to him," Dad finally said before hanging up. Jason never called. 11 days later, I pulled into Grandpa George's property for the annual family reunion in my 2009 Ford F250. It had over 200,000 miles on it. The passenger mirror was held on with a bracket I'd fabricated myself. The tailgate was dented, the bed scratched up, and the toolbox permanently bolted in the back. It was also completely paid off, maintained to spec, and had never left me stranded. I parked beside Jason's white BMW, the one he'd bought 8 months earlier. Grandpa's place sat on 3 acres outside Centerville with a farmhouse, a detached garage, and a duplex he'd owned since 1979. Every July, the family gathered there for folding tables, coolers, lawn chairs, horseshoes, and barbecue. I grabbed the potato salad I'd made and headed toward the backyard. Jason was standing by the driveway with 2 of our cousins, a beer in his hand, staring at my truck. Before I even got within 30 feet, he raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Ryan, seriously? You're still driving that thing? Every time you pull in, I think the landscaping guy just showed up." My cousins laughed. Dad looked over from the grill, then quickly looked away. Jason took another drink, looked me over from head to toe, noticed my work boots and Carhartt t-shirt, and smirked. "So, little brother, what have you been up to lately?" Everyone in the yard turned toward me. I set the potato salad on the closest folding table, slipped my hands into my pockets, and said, "I just signed a contract to retrofit the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems for the new St. Elizabeth Medical Center building in Kettering. It's worth $2,300,000. We start in September." His face didn't change right away. He froze for a second, like he was trying to process what I had just said. Then he laughed, but nobody else did. "Come on, $2,300,000 for what?" "Commercial heating, ventilation, and air conditioning," I replied. "Chillers, air handlers, rooftop units, ductwork, and building automation. It's a 14-month project, and I've got a crew of 11 working on it." Behind me, I heard Grandpa George let out a sound that was somewhere between a cough and a laugh. When I turned around, he was wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, looking at me like I had just told him he won the lottery. $2,300,000, he repeated quietly. Then he looked at Dad. "You hear that, Michael?" Dad heard every word. He stood at the grill holding a pair of tongs, and the color slowly faded from his face. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me for a few seconds before turning back to the burgers like they suddenly needed all of his attention. Just 11 days earlier, he had called me asking if I could help cover Jason's loan payments. The same Jason who hadn't closed a single deal. At that moment, standing behind the grill, Dad realized his backup son had landed a commercial contract worth $2,300,000, while his favorite son couldn't even sell a studio apartment. I didn't rub it in. I just picked up the potato salad and carried it over to the food table. "Hi, Mom." She gave me a hug, but I could tell she had heard everything. The rest of the afternoon went the way family gatherings usually do after something awkward happens. Everyone tried a little too hard to act normal. Uncle Kevin came over and asked about the hospital project. Cousin Ashley quietly bumped my fist when nobody was watching. My aunt told me she was proud of me. She had never said that before. Jason disappeared for almost 40 minutes. When he finally came back, he stayed close to Mom and never looked at me again. I hadn't come to the reunion planning to embarrass anyone. I honestly hadn't. My plan was to say business was going well and leave it at that. But when someone turns you into the joke in front of your whole family, sometimes the truth is all you need. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed to help Grandpa clean up. Uncle Kevin carried the folding chairs into the garage while Grandpa and I sat outside watching fireflies drift across the field. The cicadas buzzed nonstop in the hot July air. "Sit down, Ryan," Grandpa said as he took a sip of sweet tea. I pulled a chair over and sat beside him. "You know, I worked as a plumber for 42 years. "Yes, sir." "You know what people used to call me when I was your age? A pipe jockey. Your grandmother's family didn't want her to marry me because I worked with my hands. Her father was a bank manager. He thought I wasn't good enough for them." Grandpa took another sip before pointing toward the duplex behind the farmhouse. I bought that place in 1979 with cash I saved after spending 15 years crawling under houses. No loan, no cosigner, just hard work. I stayed quiet because I knew he wasn't finished. Your dad never understood that. He wanted the office, the title, and his name on the door. There's nothing wrong with that, but he raised Jason to think the same way. Then he looked me straight in the eyes. You turned out like me, kid, and I want you to know something. I'm going to make sure that means something permanent. Come by tomorrow morning around 9 o'clock. I nodded. I'll be here. When I got back to my apartment that night, I sat in my truck for almost 10 minutes thinking about the reunion. Jason's face, Dad's silence, and whatever Grandpa meant. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dad. We need to talk about your brother's situation. The bank sent a collections warning. Call me. I looked at the message, slipped my phone back into my pocket, and went inside. Sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about one small moment from the reunion that nobody else seemed to notice. When I told everyone about the hospital contract, Mom reached over and squeezed Jason's arm. Not mine. His. Even when I was the one who succeeded, he was still the one getting comforted. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Jason. Hey man, congratulations on the contract. Seriously, that's huge. For a second, I almost believed he meant it. Then another message came through. Dad said you might be able to help me out with something. Jason texted again. Want to grab lunch sometime this week? There it was. The congratulations were just the opening move. I plugged my phone into the charger, turned off the light, and waited for morning. The next morning, I pulled into Grandpa George's driveway just before 9 o'clock. He was already sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee, wearing his old Carhartt jacket, even though the weather was warm. Some people just get cold after they turn 80. Without saying much, he handed me a mug and nodded toward the porch swing. I had my attorney update my estate plan 6 weeks ago, he said. No small talk, no build-up. I'm leaving the duplex to you. I set my coffee down because I honestly thought I might drop the mug. The duplex is completely paid off. No mortgage. The tenants have lived there for 11 years. They pay $1,200 every month and have never missed a payment. It was appraised at $280,000 last spring. For a moment, I couldn't find the words. Grandpa rocked gently on the porch swing before speaking again. Your dad has been expecting that property to go to him after I'm gone. He has never said it directly, but I'm not blind. He's mentioned it to Kevin. He's mentioned it to his accountant. I think he's planning to sell it to clean up whatever mess Jason gets himself into. He looked out across the field behind the house. I didn't build that duplex, so your father could sell it to bail out a grown man who refuses to work. I built it with these hands. He held them up. They were scarred, thick, and permanently rough from decades of hard work. I'm leaving it to the only person in this family who understands what these hands really mean. I sat there without saying anything while my coffee slowly got cold. Nobody knows, he said. Not your dad, not your mom, not Jason. My attorney has all the updated paperwork. When the time comes, it's already done. I wanted you to hear it from me first. When are you going to tell them? I asked. He smiled. When the time is right. I drove home, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. Not because I was excited, but because I knew what this would do to my family. Over the next 6 weeks, I kept doing what I had always done. I went to work, I ran my business, I showed up for my crew and my clients. I never told anyone about the duplex. Partly because Grandpa asked me not to. Mostly because I wanted to see how my family acted when they still believed nothing had changed. To them, I was still just Ryan. The backup plan. The guy who fixed air conditioners. People show you exactly who they are when they think nothing has changed. 3 days after the reunion, Dad called again. This time he skipped the small talk. Ryan, we have to figure this out. The bank is threatening collections on Jason's loan. If that happens, it hits my credit. I understand, I said. So what are we going to do? I noticed that word. We. Not what is Jason going to do? Not, what am I going to do since I co-signed the loan? Somehow, it had become everyone's problem. I already told you what I'm willing to do. Jason can come work for me. $22 an hour with full benefits after 90 days. He's not going to do manual labor, Ryan. He has a degree. Then I don't know what else to tell you. He hung up. 2 days later, Jason texted me. I know we haven't always been close, but I'm dealing with something serious right now. Can we talk? I didn't answer right away because I was in a pre-construction meeting for the hospital project. 3 hours later, another message came through. Guess not. Good to know where I stand. I replied. I was in a meeting. What's going on? He called almost immediately. I stepped outside my shop and leaned against my truck. Look, he said, sounding more humble than usual. The real estate market is brutal. I've got prospects, but nothing is closing, and this loan is killing me. How much do you still owe? About $32,000 on the principal. Plus, I'm behind on the payments. What happened to the original $40,000? He hesitated. Marketing, website, office space, operating costs. Office space? It was just a co-working desk. For how long? About 10 months. I did the math. $8,000 on a shared desk? Ryan, I don't need an audit. I need help. I already offered you a job. I'm not crawling through ductwork. Then we don't have much else to talk about. There was a long silence before he spoke again. Dad said you might cover a few months of the payments. Dad said that? I'm still not paying your loan. It must be nice sitting on a $2,300,000 contract and telling your own brother no. There he was, the real Jason. It only took about 4 minutes. That contract is revenue, not profit, I said. It pays for labor, equipment, materials, insurance, and bonding. I run a business. I'm not the family bank. He muttered something under his breath and hung up. I saved every text and took screenshots of every conversation, not because I expected a lawsuit, because I knew my family. One day the story would become that I abandoned my struggling brother out of spite. I wanted proof of what had actually happened. The weeks went by. I stayed focused on getting ready for the hospital project, hired 2 new technicians, and kept moving forward. Meanwhile, Cousin Ashley would occasionally text me updates without making it sound like gossip. Dad said Uncle Kevin turned him down too. That part stuck with me. Uncle Kevin wasn't a wealthy man. If Dad had started asking his own brother for money, things were clearly worse than he had admitted. Ashley ended one message by saying, "For what it's worth, I think you're handling this the right way. Jason needs to grow up." It was nice to hear, but I knew the rest of the family was hearing a completely different story. In their version, Jason was the hard-working entrepreneur, and I was a selfish brother sitting on a big contract who refused to help his own family. For the time being, I let them believe it. Late in August, Mom sent me a text. She almost never texted unless it was a holiday or a picture of her garden. This one simply said, "Ryan, can you call me when you get a chance?" I called her from my truck after work. "Hi, honey," she said. "I don't want to get in the middle of this, but your father is really struggling over this loan. He can't sleep. His blood pressure is up. I'm worried about him." "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom." "Jason is trying. He really is. He's got a couple of leads that could close soon, but your father can't keep making those payments." "Mom, I already offered Jason a real job with a steady paycheck. He turned it down." She paused before answering. "Honey, he went to college. He can't just go work construction." "It's not construction. It's commercial heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And I'm not sure why my trade school education somehow counts less than his college degree." She let out a sigh. "I just think family should help family." "I agree. That's why I offered him a job." After a long silence, she quietly said, "You sound just like your grandfather." I didn't think she meant it as a compliment, but I accepted it as one. Nothing changed. September arrived and my crew started work on the hospital project. The first phase meant tearing out old mechanical systems, coordinating subcontractors, and solving problems from sunrise until late afternoon. Right in the middle of it all, Grandpa called. "How's the hospital job going?" "Good. We're on schedule." "Good. I'm proud of you." He paused for a moment. "I'm having the whole family over for dinner on the 28th. "Everyone?" "Everyone." "What's the occasion?" Another pause. "It's time." I knew exactly what he meant. "You sure?" "I've been sure for 6 months. I'm 84, Ryan. I'm not waiting for a better time. Just be there. This is mine to handle." After we hung up, I sat in my truck outside the job site thinking about what was coming. Dad, already buried under Jason's debt, was about to find out the duplex he expected to inherit was going to me. Jason was about to learn that the property he probably counted on one day saving him would never belong to him. And I was about to become the villain in their story simply because I proved they had believed in the wrong son. The next 3 weeks passed quietly. Dad stopped calling. Jason stopped texting. Even Mom went silent. I wondered if they had finally given up. Then Ashley sent me a message. "Heads up. Your dad says Jason has a big commercial property deal closing any day now. He says it'll fix everything." I wanted to believe it, but I had been hearing about deals that were almost done for the last 18 months. None of them had ever happened. I replied, "I hope it's real this time." She answered, "Me too." About 2 weeks before the dinner, Dad showed up at my shop without calling first. Marcus walked into my office and said, "There's a guy out front asking for you." I went outside and found Dad standing in the parking lot. He looked at my service vans, my shop, and the Barrett mechanical sign like he was seeing them for the first time. "Can we talk inside?" he asked. My office wasn't anything fancy, just a desk, a filing cabinet, a whiteboard covered with the hospital schedule, and my contractor's license hanging on the wall. Dad sat across from me and rested his hands on his knees. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I've been putting too much pressure on you over Jason. That wasn't fair. You've clearly built something here, and I haven't given you the credit you deserve." "I appreciate that," I said. "But I need you to understand my position." He leaned forward. "If that loan goes to collections, my credit is ruined. Your mother and I want to refinance the house next year. If my credit score drops, we could lose that chance." For the first time, I believed everything he said. He wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was scared. I felt that old instinct to solve problems for people who had never solved any for me. "What exactly are you asking?" "I'm not asking you to pay the loan. I'm asking you to co-sign a refinance. We roll the debt together, lower the payments, and Jason pays it off once this commission comes through." I looked at him. "You want me to put my name on Jason's debt? Just temporarily. And what if the deal never closes?" "It will." "What if it doesn't?" He didn't have an answer. I finally said, "I can't do that, Dad. My business depends on bonding capacity. If I take on extra debt, I could lose future contracts. I'm not putting my company at risk." He slowly nodded. He didn't argue. He just stood up, looked around my office one last time and said, "You've done well, Ryan." Then he walked out. I sat there for a long time after he left. It hurt seeing my father that scared. I knew I technically could help, but I also knew that if I signed those papers, Jason's debt would become my debt. Nothing would really change except whose name was on it. That night, Jason sent me the longest text I had ever gotten from him. He admitted he had been arrogant. He apologized for making fun of my truck. He said he wished we had been closer growing up. He even claimed he looked up to me more than I realized. Then, near the end, came the real reason for the message. I know Dad mentioned refinancing. I'd never ask you to risk your business, but if there's any way you could help us figure this out, even with advice, I'd appreciate it. That one word, us, said everything. The debt belonged to everyone. The success always belonged to Jason. I answered with one sentence. I hope the deal works out. Good luck. He never replied. 2 days before Grandpa's dinner, Ashley called. Have you talked to Grandpa lately? Not this week. Why? Uncle Kevin said Grandpa specifically told everyone they had to be there, like it wasn't optional. Mom thinks it's about his health. He's not sick. How do you know? I hesitated just long enough for her to notice. I just know Grandpa. She didn't ask anything else, but I could tell she thought I knew more than I was saying. The morning of the 28th, I woke up before sunrise. I drank my coffee, checked my emails, looked over the work orders for the hospital project, and tried to stick to my normal routine. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I got to Grandpa's house early. He was in the kitchen making pot roast, and the whole house smelled like garlic and rosemary. "You're early," he said. "Couldn't sleep?" He looked at me over the top of his glasses. Nervous? A little. He slid the roast back into the oven. "I've been waiting a long time to do this. I should have done it years ago." Together we set the table for 8. Grandpa, me, Mom, Dad, Jason, Uncle Kevin, Aunt Susan, and Ashley. Everyone showed up around 5 o'clock. Dinner stayed quiet. People talked about the weather, work, and retirement. Nobody mentioned the loan. Nobody mentioned my business. It felt like everyone knew something important was about to happen, but nobody knew what. After dinner, Grandpa folded his napkin, set it beside his plate, and looked around the table. "I asked all of you to come because I have something to say, and I only want to say it once." The room went completely silent. Grandpa looked at everyone before he spoke. "I've updated my estate plan," he said calmly. "The house and the land will stay in a trust, but the duplex is going to Ryan." Nobody said a word. Dad's fork slipped from his hand and hit the plate with a loud clatter. Mom stared at Grandpa in shock. Jason looked at me like he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Uncle Kevin finally broke the silence. "Well, that's settled." Dad found his voice. "Dad, can we talk about this in private?" Grandpa shook his head. "No, I wanted everyone here because I'm only explaining this once. No phone calls afterward, no different versions of the story. This is my decision." Dad's face tightened. "You're giving a $280,000 property to Ryan instead of your own son." Grandpa never flinched. "Michael, I spent 42 years working as a plumber. I bought that duplex with money I earned through hard work. I fixed every leak, replaced every roof, found every tenant, and paid every bill." He pointed at me. "Ryan understands what it means to build something with his own hands because he's done it himself. He never asked for a co-signer. He never expected anyone to rescue him. He built a business, hired employees, and earned every contract he has." Dad argued that Jason had been trying to build a business too. Grandpa answered without hesitation. "Trying isn't the same as building. Ryan has results. Jason has excuses." Jason's face turned red. "So that's all you think of me?" Grandpa let out a slow sigh. "I love you, Jason, but loving you doesn't mean I have to reward bad decisions. I'm not leaving this duplex so your father can sell it and pay off your debts." The whole room froze. Grandpa knew about the loan. He knew Dad expected to inherit the duplex, and he knew exactly why. Dad pushed his chair back and stood up. "You're punishing me." "No," Grandpa said. "I'm rewarding the grandson who earned my respect." Then Dad turned toward me. "You've been manipulating him." I stood up and looked him in the eyes. I didn't even know about the duplex until Grandpa told me after the reunion. I never asked for it, and I never tried to influence him. You kept it from us. Because it wasn't my decision to announce. Mom quietly asked everyone to calm down and talk it through. Grandpa shook his head again. Everything had already been signed. "And if anyone contests my will, every major asset I own goes to the Dayton Plumbers Union Scholarship Fund instead." That ended the conversation. Jason got up and walked out without saying another word. A few seconds later, we heard his BMW pull out of the driveway. Dad and Mom left soon after. The family dinner ended in complete silence. Only Grandpa, Uncle Kevin, Aunt Susan, Ashley, and I were still there. Ashley gave a sad smile. "He's right." Uncle Kevin nodded. Michael spent years protecting Jason from the consequences of his own choices. After everyone left, Grandpa and I cleaned up the kitchen together. When we finished, he looked at me and smiled. "You doing all right?" I nodded. "Yeah." "Good," he said. "Now go home. You've got a business to run." The next few weeks were hard but not surprising. Dad barely spoke to Grandpa. Mom tried to convince him to change his will, but it didn't work. Jason called once, but Grandpa refused to change his mind. Not long after that, Jason's big commercial real estate deal fell apart. The loan officially went to collections. Dad's credit took a hit, and refinancing the house was no longer possible. Then something unexpected happened. Jason accepted a sales job at a Chevrolet dealership. Mom called me in tears. He has a college degree. He shouldn't be selling cars. I reminded her there was nothing wrong with honest work. Ironically, Jason turned out to be pretty good at it. Within a few months, he was earning steady commissions and finally making the loan payments himself. We still weren't close, but for the first time, he was taking responsibility for his own life. Dad slowly started changing too. One afternoon, he sent me a text. "Saw one of your Barrett mechanical trucks on the highway today. Looks professional." I simply replied, "Thanks, Dad." It wasn't an apology, but it was the first time he had ever sincerely acknowledged what I had built. Grandpa and I settled into a routine of drinking coffee together on his porch every Sunday. Sometimes we talked about work. Sometimes we talked about nothing at all. Barrett Mechanical kept growing. We finished the hospital project on schedule and landed 2 more commercial contracts. I hired more managers, expanded the company, and finally reached the point where the business didn't depend entirely on me anymore. Ashley became one of the relatives I was closest to. She often brought her son to visit Grandpa. One afternoon she admitted, "I've always felt like you were more of a brother to me than Jason ever was." I didn't know what to say. I just laughed and handed her another plate at lunch. Through all of it, I kept driving the same old pickup truck. I could have bought a new one anytime I wanted. I just never saw a reason to. Every dent reminded me where I started. Every mile reminded me that real success isn't measured by what you drive. It's measured by what you build. Looking back, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. For years, I wanted my parents to see my worth. I believed success would finally earn their approval. Instead, I learned something far more valuable. I didn't need their approval anymore. Grandpa believed in me long before I signed a multi-million-dollar contract. Over time, I learned to believe in myself the same way. I was never the favorite. I was the backup plan. The son with the cheap picture frame on the staircase. While everyone else was betting on potential, I was quietly building a life one job at a time. In the end, Grandpa didn't leave me the duplex just because I was family. He left it to me because I lived by the values he had believed in his entire life. Work hard, keep your word, take responsibility, build something real. That inheritance was never just a duplex. It was proof that, in the end, character matters more than appearances. If I learned one thing from all of this, it's simple. Never measure your worth by the people who underestimate you. Let them chase titles, status, or easy success if that's what they want. You just keep working. Keep building. In the end, results speak louder than opinions, and sooner or later, the truth becomes impossible to ignore.